Hi, this is Stephen Mead, lifelong entrepreneur, business owner, and global speaker. Over the years, I've read hundreds of books and spent thousands of hours developing what I call the BullsEye belief system. And I've used that system to develop my own companies, as well as help others learn to be specific, targeted, and focused to get exactly what they want in life. Again, I'm Stephen Mead, and this is the BullsEye Guy podcast. Stephen Mead again, back with another BullsEye Guy podcast. Big week coming up. This is after the holidays. And on a little personal note, I went and finally got to play soccer last night. I hadn't played in a couple of weeks, and I made a joke for those of you who understand soccer. I said, boy, we're really out of shape. And the guy that organized said, oh, yeah, well, everybody still has all of their Christmas and New Year's Eve hangover. And by shape, I meant the positions we were in, not the actual shape. It's a bunch of, old guys running around after the holidays. But holidays are past us. The new year is upon us. And what does that mean? Today I'm going to talk about events. And I know I've given some hacks before on how to kind of network and hack conferences and things like that. Well, I've got plenty of jokes. Those of you that have been following me on the podcast, one of my jokes around blockchain in particular is before the internet, there was no internet. And I say that and people kind of laugh, but you have to think about it for a minute. Before the internet, there was no internet. So that means there weren't websites or email or Telegram or Slack or all of these channels. The internet rolled out over basically 2 decades and over continents. Blockchain's really different. Blockchain launched all at once globally. So you have this amazing plethora of events that were going on around the world. We've spent 18 months to 2 years, and there's a litany of our friends. Gordon Einstein, who we're going to interview on the next podcast, Michael Turpin, Alex Lightman, John Sutton, who you guys have seen, traveling around the world, Brad Yazzer. There were so many events going on that you could really get diluted. And so I like to slow down again. The bullseye guy, the target is, how do you target what the events are that you like? And I'm going to talk about my top 10 events. May not be your top 10, but I think coming up with a list of events and why you like them is really helpful. So in no particular order, I'm going to go through some of what I think are the best events around the world. And I'll weave in some little hacks and techniques and things like that. And one of them I'm going to start with, not as the event, but a hack, is the noise. And what I mean by noise right now, there are so many platforms to communicate with. There's WhatsApp and WeChat and Telegram and Facebook and Signal, and it's complicated. We're actually using Telegram a lot right now, and Telegram is sort of like a private Twitter. It lets you create your own little group. Now, how and why it's better than WhatsApp, I haven't quite figured out yet, because we can do WhatsApp groups, but Telegram seems to be the cool new kid on the block. And so we've got some big events coming up, and each of these events have their own little Telegram channel. And then we've actually created our own Telegram channel to communicate with our own people in a private group. So again, if you're doing these events, creating a community before you go to the event or finding the communities that exist can help accelerate you into the event. It gives you access to all kinds of introductions and events and links and things like that. What are the events? Well, again, no particular order, because a lot of these guys who run these things are friends of mine. But the granddaddy of them all is coming up here in January. We are getting prepared for it, and that is called Davos. And many of you have probably heard of Davos. I'm going to give you some Davos insights. And again, I've joked about this. There's a difference between being at an event, being in an event, and participating within the event. Sort of like being at the Super Bowl. I've been to 4 Super Bowls. They're fun. I've been at the Super Bowl, meaning I was in the city, at some of the parties, hanging out. I've only been into one game, and in that one game, I wasn't on the field or in a suite. So there's different levels of participation at these events. Davos is its own animal. Davos is officially called WEF, which is the World Economic Forum. So the event in Davos is not Davos. The event is WEF, but it happens to be at Davos. Davos is its own cute, quaint little town. So if you're fortunate enough to get invited, Davos sort of has these layers. Layer 1 is what's called the promenade. Again, we're in Santa Monica. Well, right now we're plugged for Groove Radio. We're downtown LA and the Groove Radio stations, which are awesome, by the way. But anybody that's ever been to LA, Santa Monica has what's called the 3rd Street Promenade. And you can walk up and down. Davos has a promenade that for the most part you can walk up and down and get into, and security's there, but it's light. Then they have what's called a hotel zone. To get in the hotel zone, you need a different badge. And there's certain events that are at hotels where sometimes you can get a day pass to get to that hotel, or you have to buy a ticket and the badge gets you into that hotel. And some of these tickets are $250, they're $1,000, they're $5,000. It's Davos, it's expensive. And then the top level, invitation only, $30,000 white badge is the official WEF badge. So Davos has this layer. It's sort of like a ecosystem of caste levels. But when you're there, the people you meet are amazing. Again, it takes planning, it takes efficiency, but that is one of the top events in the world for global leaders, influencers. You know, we're walking down the promenade and through the areas, and you run into an Al Gore and an Eric Schmidt and the president of Mexico. It's really a fascinating opportunity, but it does take planning. And Davos does a great job, not only with their own app, but then the little micro Telegram channels and the people that promote and things like that. So if you have the opportunity, it is an effort. It is expensive, but it is amazing. That is Davos. I'm going to mark these off my list. 2 is TED. I have sort of a love-hate relationship with TED, and I won't go into why that is, but I guess I will briefly. Years ago, I tried to launch an environmental product, and I created this cool product. I don't think I've talked about it on any of the shows. Maybe I will one day. Have I done a Wet Rock show? I'm going to turn into Eagle. So I created a product that saves water, plastic, power, pollution, and money in 60 seconds. Never change your habits, costs less than $20, provides education, will probably win a Nobel Peace Prize. I thought it was pretty cool. And the goal was to get companies to buy it and give it away. And I tried to create it as a community platform for TED and Clinton Global Initiatives and these bigger events. And it just didn't work because it was a product and people didn't understand. I wasn't trying to sell a product. I was trying to create a movement. And that's what TED was supposed to be about. But I love TED. For those of you that don't know about it, TED has started years ago. Chris runs it. It used to be in Long Beach. And when it was in Long Beach, it was great because Long Beach from where we are most of the time is a 35, 40-minute drive. But they moved it to Vancouver, which is fine. I mean, it takes a little effort, but almost anybody, those of you that are watching this in the audience we have probably heard of TED or TED Talks or TEDx. And again, kind of the same thing. The actual TED event is the granddaddy of them all. Those are the TED Talks. Those are the 17 minutes. You have to be invited. You have to practice. You have to submit your speech beforehand. Everything is targeted. If you watch the TED Talks, most of the speakers are amazing because they're coached, they're pre-screened, and they're put together to provide great content. TED does an amazing job with that. The TEDx are the little splinters out off on the sides, and a lot of the TEDx talks are shorter and community and localized and still great content, but the ethos of that community was really about making a difference and working together. And so that's TED. I'm going to tangent off on a minute. My favorite event of all time is no longer around. And it's unfortunate. It got caught up in some political stuff. But for many years, there was one called the Clinton Global Initiative, CGI. Now, Clinton Global Initiative is different than the Clinton Foundation. And I'm not going to talk politics, but a lot of stuff got conflated together. And Hillary was Secretary of State. But the foundation was raising money. Clinton Global Initiative, Doug Band was really the guy that created it, was an amazing group. The ethos of Clinton Global Initiative was unlike any I've ever been a part of. One, you had to be invited. Two, you had to make a commitment to do something. So everybody in Clinton Global, CGI, was about making a commitment, and they tracked it and they monitored it. Again, another event that was expensive, but the access to people who were trying to make a change and a difference was really amazing. And one of the stories I remember, I think, again, don't hold this against me, my memory's fuzzy at times, but not always. I'm pretty sure I believe it was Pepsi. And Pepsi's commitment at CGI was to reduce plastic packaging because they had the plastic bottles and what they did was they reduced the size of the cap. And all of you have probably seen it now. Whenever you go to a water bottle or something, you open it. That cap used to be pretty big. And now it's down to this little tiny, again, I'm on YouTube, so I'm making this little, thing with my fingers. If you're just listening, you can't see it, but you know what I'm talking about. The caps got smaller. And what Pepsi did is reduce the cap size by a third and reduce plastic. And then they also invented plant-based plastic, which helped the environment. So again, it was these major corporations making minor changes that had major impact. So CGI is not around anymore. If anybody could ever pull that off, that would be amazing, but it's gone. What is still around, again, I've been a fortunate participant for 14 or 15 years. I love these guys. It's the Milken Global Conference. In LA, every year, a guy named Michael Milken. Some of you may know him from years ago. Depends on age. Some things are age appropriate, but Michael was involved in some financial aspects years ago that we won't go into. There was a great book out called The Den of Thieves. A friend of mine's in it. It was Michael Milken, Ivan Boesky, and Dennis Levine. And the movie with Gordon Gekko. What's the movie? Gordon Gekko. Eagle's trying to come up with it too. Wall Street.
Yeah, Wall Street.
Wall Street. Gordon Gekko. That was modeled after Dennis Levine, who was part of the Den of Thieves with Michael Milken and Boesky. But Michael put together this global initiative, and it was initially and primarily around education and finance and health, because he had some health issues and really wanted to find a way to give back. The aspect of people who attend the Milken Global Conference, again, are top-notch. And I'm not enamored. I'm not chasing stars. I love people who've made a difference, who are making a contribution, who are trying to do big things to change the world. And some of these events give you, an amalgamation of a bunch of people together in a short amount of time. So it's about collapsing time frames. It's about getting access to people that really are doing great, amazing things. Milken Global Conference in LA. It's usually in May. Beverly Hilton, I believe. But anyway, it's a good one. Another fun one. SALT. SALT was started and is started by Anthony Scaramucci. Any of you that follow politics may have seen Anthony for his 11 days supernova when he was with the President Trump as a press secretary, I believe, for 11 days, 4 hours, and 37 minutes. Something along those lines. Like, Anthony knows exactly how long he was there. We've been in meetings with him, and he tells the story. He was there 11 days, and got fired. But SALT, along with his business partner, Ray Nolte, again, more about finance, more about things that, and again, these are things that are interesting to me. You may have your own set, but SALT has these events where you get fascinating conversations. The last one we went to, fortunately, Vegas, we skipped Abu Dhabi, but on stage is Mark Cuban, who many of you may know from Shark Tank, or depending on how far you go back to technology and broadcast, and Steve Case from AOL. It's Mark Cuban and Steve Case. And another one was General Kelly, who was in the Trump administration. And another one was Sean Rad, who was at Adley and Tinder. And then another, like, just this breadth of people. Bernie, I can't remember Bernie's last name. Bernie's on all the time. He was the police commissioner for New York. Anyway, just SALT does an amazing job of getting together this range of people from finance to philanthropy to politics. And because it's a smaller group, a little more intimate, a lot of these people are walking around, you get a chance to say hi and see them and access. So SALT's a fun one. They do Vegas is their big one. They just did Abu Dhabi, a couple different ones coming up. Another one, DLD, Yossi Verdi. Yossi is a technology legend. Any of you that have been around technology know Yossi. Israeli entrepreneur, ICQ, DLD, Digital Life Design, coming up in Munich, Munich 2020. I forget what year we're in. We will actually be there, fortunate to be invited. But again, the range of people at DLD, I've seen the speaker roster. Now, Hopefully they're all there. We don't know, but it's Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook. It's Mark Zuckerberg. It's Peter Thiel. It's Eric Schmidt of Google. It's heads of state, heads of country. It's, again, fascinating group of people. And the design, the life design is about making a difference, making an impact. So when you start getting these sort of elevated groups of people together with the common goal of at least trying to make a difference, it's really interesting how you can move the needle. So DLD Munich, their website's up. They've got events around the world. I know they've done New York. They've got several other ones, but really check that one out. It's good stuff. Another one, as we are moving through the list here, Roth, the Roth Capital Conference. Now, many of you may not have heard of Roth Capital, but a group, their big event is in March, I believe, in Laguna, California. And Roth, I believe, has raised about $65 billion, with a B, $billion for other companies. So in the world of finance, Roth is sort of like an investment banker where they're hired to help a company raise money, and they'll create a roadshow and they'll move them around and they'll take them across country and they'll do events in London and different areas. We're actually talking to them about trying to get into Malta and do some things in Malta. There's some challenges in Malta right now. Boy, the geopolitical side of things we have to track is just interesting. I hope Malta pulls through with the prime minister. There's some things going on there, but trying to get a group of financial capitalists to go to Malta and bring in companies and help raise money. Roth really focuses on companies trying to go up to what's called NASDAQ, which is a certain level of company in the exchanges in America. Underneath there's a couple other conferences around LA that deal more with OTC stocks, but Roth Capital Conference really does a great job. The speakers they bring in, and what's happened with Roth, which I know, as well as Davos, trying to go through here. I don't know about Milken, and we'll get to the rest of these, but they've actually started creating different tracks. And one of the tracks that a lot of people are on, and I own the domain name. If anybody ever wants to buy this domain name, let me know. It's for sale. I bought it years ago when I was doing the environmental product. Green means green, right? And it was for the eco product. Green, which is the environmental, everybody's green, means green. Like if you go green, you can make money. Well, now the real green is cannabis. So I own green means green, which means cannabis makes you money. I don't understand that market. I've never smoked a cigarette. I've never smoked pot. I've never done drugs. I try to figure out cannabis. People came to me and they're like, oh, you should figure it out. You know so many people. I tried. Different world, different market, different culture. I actually toured a facility in Los Angeles, and I'm not going to mention everybody's name. I don't think they'll get in trouble anymore because most of it's legal now, but there was a guy named Jimmy and a guy named Matt, and Jimmy was the grower. Matt was the guy that came out of UCLA. Jimmy's actually won a bunch of awards at High Times. He's created these strains. Again, I'm not a cannabis guy, but they're like, oh, come tour the facility. Great. Walked in the front. It was this beautiful retail store with all of these accoutrements and paraphernalia and stuff that I've never seen and would never use, and gummies. And I was like, okay. Like, oh, well, you should come see the grow facility. I didn't know what a grow facility was. They open the door and we walk into this warehouse looking thing, and it's just rows and rows of plants. And all the plants are there, and they've got the lights, and then each of the little plant pods had their own name, and some of them were playing different kinds of music because they were trying to figure out which ones, and if it was a certain strain for rock and roll people, it's rock, like fascinating. All I know is when I walked out of that thing, my clothes smelled so bad. I had to go home. Not only did I have a meeting I couldn't go to, I couldn't even put my clothes in my house. I put them out on a porch over a banister until I could drop them off. And that was the end of my exploration into cannabis. I like my clothes, like things to smell. I just couldn't do it. What's the point of that ramble? Roth Capital has created an entire cannabis track, which I find interesting. Davos has created a cannabis track. Rob Charles, who was in here, one of our other podcast interviews, episode 24, I think, with Goldfinger, Goldfinger's going to be in Davos. They've got their investment group created a cannabis track. So these different events are sort of coalescing down into these smaller subsets, which I find interesting. But Roth Capital, if you're trying to raise money, is a good one. Here's another one. Most people haven't heard of this one. Very interesting. Horizis. I don't even know if I say it right. I'm actually speaking at the event. Super excited. It's in Portugal in March. Horasis. Horizis. It's a global leadership event. And when you go through who the speakers are, it's President of Norway, Prime Minister of this, President of that, head of this. It's global intellectual people in a leadership conference. Again, one that most people hadn't heard of. They may not be aware of it, but one of my favorite ones in Portugal coming up. Another one at the Vatican Church. I'm writing my last one down here. The Vatican one's interesting. It goes by different names, but there's an event every year that's around the environment, that's around making a difference. And again, it's the Vatican Church. So if anybody gets invited to the Vatican, you can pretty much guess they're going to go. Right? So it's one of these invitations that when you look at the roster and the who's who, it's fascinating. I don't know enough about the people going for the motivation to actually make a difference or just to go get a tour of the Vatican. And I'm fine with that because the people that are there that you get to see and meet are still really cool. And actually, I'm going to turn to Eagle here. You know how I found out about that one was John Sutton. Oh, yeah. Because John does all the Vatican work, and that was one of his events. So really, really amazing event. What else have we got? Okay. Malta. I know you guys know that we have an affinity for Malta, have talked about it quite a bit, but there's two huge events in Malta that are distinctively different, but I still think are unique for what they provide around the world. Let's start with the smaller one. Not that it's pejoratively less, it's just different. Delta Summit. That is the government of Malta's official blockchain event. Well, why is that fascinating? Most other events around the world, especially if they're blockchain, aren't government-sponsored or sanctions event. They're an event where somebody from the government might show up. The prime minister, a president, a vice president, somebody might show up at the event. It's not the government's actual event. So Malta's really done a unique job of saying, hey, we, the government, are going to create Delta Summit. We're going to provide access to government agencies and people that you could partner with and do business within the country to be supportive of the ecosystem as a whole. That's what I think makes it unique. There's some cool events in the Bahamas, and Michael Turpin and his group do Coin Agenda. They've got one coming up in Puerto Rico. But again, from a government aspect, really, really a big one, really cool one. Speaking of Michael Turpin and that whole group, oh, wait, I can't. I got to go back to Malta. I'm almost done. We had Oliver on as well. Also in Malta is the AIBC, the AI and blockchain. It's part of Sigma Group. What Iman and his group, he is a professional event organizer. Delta Summit's cool, but it was government sponsored, so it's a little different. The AIBC, we were fortunate. We were just there in November. 9,000 people. It's an extension of the gaming conference of Sigma for what these guys have done. It's one of the top in the world. I like it better than Miami blockchain. I like it better than Barcelona. It's really amazing. So back to Michael Turpin. We're wrapping up here. We're going to finish this, then we'll give you a couple little techniques. A lot of our crew, our quote crew, again, on YouTube right now, I am air quoting. I am usually at this point in January on my way to the desert of CES, the Consumer Electronics Show. Been going for years. There used to be 70, 80,000 people, and then 100, 130. Now there's like 160, 170, 180,000 people for CES. Again, these things are massive. So to make them effective, this is where the telegrams and the pre-planning and the ways to take the noise out really start to help. Michael Turpin, again, does a great job. He's got an entire party list of where all the parties and the events are. You've got to find a way to get access to these. But CES is the epicenter for most things around technology. And I also like Money 2020. So I'm conflating and combining those two together because they're both in Vegas, both similar, but Money 2020 is more on finance and fintech. CES is more on consumer electronics. So depending on which area you're in, what your expertise is, what your interests, both fascinating opportunities. And then the last one, Patty Cosgrove has the Web Summit series, which is a cool event around technology. Patty did an amazing job. Started out in Dublin years ago. The first one I went to was fun. It was with my friend David Steinberg and his business partner, John Scully, who is the CEO of Apple. And about 8,000 or 9,000 people converged on Dublin, hundreds of speakers, big stage, great production. They actually, the color scheme for Web Summit series is purple, like purple and green. And they painted the sheep purple and green. So as you're walking through, there's sheep in a paddock who are theme related and purple. Really interesting. But Web Summit series ultimately moved to Lisbon, Portugal. And Portugal's really doing an amazing job of trying to be more entrepreneurial and push forward. And Patty, being at the forefront of that, moved to Lisbon years ago and has helped move that ecosystem forward. So those are some of my top. I don't even know if it's my top 10, but when we look at events around the world, we had to say, which ones do we really want to go to? Which ones can we get access to? Which ones are we fortunate to be invited to? And there's a difference between being at an event, being in an event, and participating. And we're starting to do a lot more participating with panels and moderations. I was just at AIBC in Malta, and they sent me the roster. I ended up with 4 events. Excuse me. I moderated one. I was on 2 panels, but they put me on a panel by accident because they looked at the roster real quick and I'm on stage and I took some other guy's seat and they got ready to pull me off and the organizer's like, no, just leave Steven on. So I got to do 3 panels and 1 moderator, but I wasn't supposed to. The next big AIBC event coming up is in June in Manila. Again, same group of people. They just sort of move AIBC Sigma from Malta coming up to Manila. Those are the big ones. I'm going to finish with some of my favorite conference hacks, wrapping up in the last couple of minutes here. And I've given these before, but these are always good ones. Number 1, if you are going to an event, send an email out to your contact list. Send an email out saying, hey, I'm going to be at this event. If you know anybody attending, I'd love an introduction. Anybody you think I should meet. And oh, by the way, here's a link to the speakers. I always like to provide a link to the speakers. Why? Well, if somebody introduces me to an attendee at the event, I'm super excited. I'm grateful. The speakers are usually not always an elevation above, but it's interesting if you can get introduced to the speakers, the organizers, the panelists, things like that. So make it easy for your friends. Just give a link. They can click on it. You'd be amazed at the introductions that you might get. So number 1, plan in advance, send an email, ask for help, ask for introductions, possibly try and do a little cocktail hour. I like doing my events anywhere around the world, but I've learned, here's my trick. These are my life hacks. I don't tell a hotel or restaurant I'm doing an event. If we've got London coming up. We're in London, Munich, Zurich, Davos, I want to hold a little event, but I won't tell them it's an event. The minute you tell a hotel or restaurant it's an event, what's your budget? How long do you need it for? You've got a guaranteed minimum. All of those things as an entrepreneur cause me issues. I don't like guaranteed minimums and budgets. I don't have sponsors. I'm not an event guy. So my trick is I'll call the restaurant or the hotel, say, hey, I want to do a little happy hour. I've got some guys from my office. We're bringing a few people over. Is there a section we can have sort of off on our own? I don't tell them it's a party. I don't tell them it's an event. I say, I've got a couple guys coming over from the office. We just want to have our own little private area, and they'll usually give it to you. And then you can invite people to that and have your own private area. And my favorite hack is the creepy one. And I know I've talked about it before. This one's weird, but it's fun. If you see a guy on stage or a girl on stage, and when that person's done, what usually happens is they walk to the end of the stage and everybody lines up behind them waiting to talk to that person. And you stand in line like a little troll staring at the back of the person's head in front of you. You get no information. You don't talk to the person behind you. You like trudging along like, the 7 dwarves going off to work. I don't do that. I walk up, I stand right by the speaker as close as I can without being super creepy because it's a little weird. I stand by the speaker. They'll kind of look at me, and I'm not trying to jump in line. The people waiting all think it's weird. I just stand there and I listen. But it does 3 things for you. Number 1, it teaches you how to answer questions from somebody that's at a level you may be at or want to get to. When it's an Eric Schmidt, when it's a Michael Milken, when it's an Anthony Scaramucci, like these guys have honed the process of answering questions, and they're fascinating to learn from. 2, you get to learn who that person's going to send you off to. As people are pitching ideas, there's usually a PR person or a scheduler or somebody that they'll point if they're interested. You get to learn who that is. 3, you get to hear 10, 15, 20, 30 people pitching the speaker. I get to hear 30 pitches of people in an event, and I decide who I want to go talk to. Rather than bouncing around, oh, who are you? Reading name tags, what do you do? I hate that. I hear everybody pitch the speaker, and then I'll know who to go talk to. That's how I collapse time frames within the event. So that's it. Those are my 10 events. Those are my 10 hacks. Hope you enjoy it. Again, Stephen Mead down at the Groove Radio Station, downtown LA. We are starting 2020 off with a bang. Tune in next week with another podcast. I'm Stephen Mead. This is the BullsEye Guy Podcast.